Now let's turn the program over to our semi-autonomous speaker. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, everybody. So, opening words today from a famous book by Tara Brach called Radical Acceptance. Attention is the most basic form of love. By paying attention, we let ourselves be touched by life, and our hearts naturally become open and engaged. So, I'm really happy to be here today. And feel a lot of joy, actually, for seeing faces I haven't seen in quite a while. So, thank you for the invitation to be here. You might think of this as a kind of workshop on how to make love. Not in that sense. Right? We actually know how to do that better than the other forms of love. So that's what I wanted to present to you today. And I've been, like most of you, I've been a spiritual seeker most of my life. I do think the teachings I'm going to share with you today are really the best that I have to offer. I think, in a way, there is no higher teaching in any religion. And nothing more important, really, in life than loving. So I offer that to you in the spirit. At the end of life, I think the question we really want to ask ourselves is, have we loved well? And if we have, we've lived a good life. Right? There's nothing more to say about that. So what I'm going to do with you today is a series of 3 short contemplative exercises. Probably most of you are not meditators, so we're not going to have lots of silence because that's usually problematic. So we'll be doing some guided meditations that involve visualization and some repeating of phrases internally. And I'm going to interlace that with some description of some of the virtues and values that we're going to be working on developing. So we're going to begin with some settling, and then talk about what are sometimes called the 4 highest virtues in traditional Buddhism. So I'll give a description of each of those, and then we'll actually practice. We'll do some practice of cultivating those, right, internally. And then I want to also pair those with what are known as the 6 mantras of true love in the Plum Village tradition, which is the tradition of Thich Nhat Hanh, the famous Vietnamese Buddhist monk who died a couple years ago. And then we'll end with an exercise called Just Like Me. And then hopefully we'll have some time for question and answer and conversation. Sound good? Okay, yeah. So I think especially in our world today, with our phones and our 24-hour news cycle, we live lives of distraction, right? And our attention is always being either intruded upon or demanded, right? So if you have a cell phone, and if you have any degree of notifications, right, you know that over the course of the day, even if your phone is on silent, it's buzzing or beeping, or, right, something is saying, look at me, look at me, look at me, right? So there's a war for our attention right now in our world. There's some okay things about that, but for the most part, it doesn't allow us to be fully present. And by fully present, I mean in the here and the now, without worries about the future or concerns about the past, fears, anxieties, judgments, right? And so, most of us walk around with 2 heavy suitcases all day long. And the 2 heavy suitcases, one of them is the past, right? So we're ruminating right? Thinking about regret, etc. And the other heavy suitcase is the future, right? And our worries about the future, our planning, etc. So when we can find ways to lay those suitcases down for a few moments and just rest in the present moment, we're occupying a space which is the only time we can truly be alive, right? Is now, here and now. We don't live in the past. The future hasn't happened yet, right? So the only time we can truly be alive is now. And so how do we more regularly stay connected with the now rather than allowing our mind either from external forces or our own habit of getting lost in trains of thought, right? So usually for most of us, from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, there's William James called it the stream of consciousness, right? This internal stream of thoughts, ideas, memories, plans, judgments. And so all of us have a kind of storyline, right? We have our story, which is the story of us, right? There's a sense in which our personal identity is a narrative. And there's good things about that. But to some extent, our story is not always true, right? When we engage in self-criticism, right? Oftentimes that is not fair, right? And so there's that old expression, don't believe everything you think, right? So lots of the thoughts that come through our mind are probably not terribly valuable, right? We could easily edit them out for our better. And so the way that I've sort of approached this is to try every day to spend some time where I'm not doing anything. I might be walking in the woods. I might be sitting on a meditation cushion for a few minutes in the morning, but trying to find a time where I can just be, where I'm not doing anything or anything noteworthy, right? Just allowing myself to be and letting go of those thoughts. So as thoughts enter in, noticing that they're there, but then releasing them, right? Not getting stuck in a storyline, right? Not spiraling down when it's a negative story. And so when you do that regularly, you can, I think, begin to have a little bit more freedom. And if you recognize the value of those moments of stillness or just quiet, right, you can then make a plan to more regularly incorporate them into your lives. So people today, I've heard a couple of cool things. The traditional notion of the Sabbath, right, and a day of rest. So I've heard about people who are now not going near their phone, right, for one day a week, or maybe just one afternoon a week, right? So, and of course, in traditional Judaism, you would probably be doing that anyway, right? So there's something beautiful about that, right? The idea that the Sabbath, the day of the Sabbath, should be like a little taste of heaven, right? So putting aside all of your projects, including your phone, right? Can you have an afternoon without a phone? Can you have a whole day without a phone? These things sound very appealing to me, right? They're a way of regaining your freedom, right, from that technology which is demanding our attention. This talk is really about love, true love, right? And so the connection between what I'm talking about now and the idea of loving others has to do with the fact that it's much harder to be present to others when we're not fully present with ourselves, right? So the idea is to learn to settle and be with ourselves in the present moment. And when we can do that, we can then more naturally turn to those around us and be present to them as well, right? When our mind is crowded with ideas and thoughts and judgments, it's very difficult to be fully present with the people around us, right? To do deep listening, to really connect with them, to really look at them and understand them. So that letting go is going to be necessary for that kind of deep looking and that deep connection that we're talking about. Just to sort of have a fun little sample of this, I'm assuming everybody here knows each other reasonably well, right? So just for a moment, turn to your neighbor, who I think you've seen before, and just pretend you've never seen them before, and look at their face as if you're looking at it for the first time. I'm going to look at Linda. This would be fun if Richard and Linda did this exercise, by the way. But see if you can see something you've never noticed before about their face. So you can stop now, right? But our mind fills in the blanks, right? So when we come across something that we've already seen a bunch of times, I know that face, right? So we don't pay attention to it. We stop paying attention closely. And so what we're talking about is paying attention closely. Okay, so let's do a little bit of settling, and then I want to talk about the 4 highest virtues in the Buddhist tradition. We'll begin with a couple of minutes of just quiet time. So in order to prepare yourself for this, I would just recommend that you sort of sit in a way where you can be relaxed but also alert. And when we lean back, especially, we have a tendency to not be alert, right? So sitting, if you can, if it's comfortable, with your back more or less straight, and if you can sort of uncross your legs and keep your feet flat on the ground, that would be nice. And you can just keep your hands loosely in your lap or folded. And just bring your awareness into your body. And just letting your attention range over the sensations in your body. Just noticing the aliveness of your body right now. So as you draw your attention inward, you may notice your pulse, the beat of the heart, vibration. And just scanning your body and softening any area where you may be holding tension. So we tend to hold tension in our shoulders, letting your shoulders just drop and be heavy. Softening your hands and your feet. Letting your jaw be soft. Softening the muscles around your eyes. And then bringing your awareness to your breath. As you breathe in, know that you're breathing in. As you breathe out, know that you're breathing out. You can even use a soft mental note in on the in-breath, out on the out-breath. You can even use a moment like this to do a quick check-in with yourself. What is the quality of my body today? How's my body feeling? Feeling energized or sluggish? Somewhere in between. And also checking in with your mind. Are there any sentences rolling through your head or patterns of thinking you've noticed as we've started? Patterns of thinking predominant today. And just also noticing the quality of your heart. Is your heart feeling open at this moment, or perhaps guarded, warm or cool? Maybe somewhere in between. Noticing how every in-breath has a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's a pause between the breath. Every out-breath has a beginning, a middle, and an So in this practice, you're simply riding the wave of the in-breath and the out-breath. And as long as you're attending to your breathing or other body sensation, you're in the present moment. The breath is always in the present. So when you practice moment-to-moment awareness, you stay in the present. Naturally, thoughts will enter your head, judgments. No problem. When that happens, just notice where your mind goes and gently bring it back. So when it feels comfortable, you can gently open your eyes and join us in the room again. So we have these four virtues: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. And Thich Nhat Hanh, the founder of Plum Village, has described these as the Buddha's teachings on true love, which is a little bit unusual to see them described that way. With loving kindness, you can see the connection with love, and maybe with compassion, but with the others, it might seem a stretch, or it might seem not clear why they're connected with love. So I want to make a case for that connection right now as we talk. And the first of these, loving kindness, is really the root of the other three. So if you can really practice loving kindness well, the rest of these will come along easily, and will also make the other three possible. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So loving kindness is the translation of the Sanskrit word and Pali word metta. Actually, the Sanskrit is maitri, the Pali is metta. And metta is a cognate of the word mitta, M-I-T-T-A. And mitta means friend. So when you think about what the word metta might mean or how you might translate it, if it's based on the word friend, you're thinking friendliness, right? So loving kindness is a different way of thinking about friendliness. And it's distinct from love because that has its own connotations, right? But loving kindness sort of captures the internal component, which is a loving feeling that you might have for a friend. And then the kindness is the external, how it appears on the surface. And it's often described as an antidote to ill will and anger in the Buddhist tradition. So if you're a Buddhist and you're struggling with ill will or anger towards somebody, then you might practice this loving kindness meditation. But it's good for everybody all the time anyway, even when you're not in the midst of anger and ill will. So what does it mean to practice loving kindness? You might think about how it is you relate to a friend, if someone is your friend, right? You want your friend to be happy, right? If you have a friend, you want your friend to be happy, you want them to be healthy, you want them to be secure and safe in the world. You want them to live with ease and without struggle, right? It doesn't matter who your friend is. Your friend could be another human being, it could be a squirrel, right? You can bring these qualities of loving kindness toward all things, right? So so that's what loving kindness is, right? It's really living such that you have a wish for the well-being, the welfare of other people, right? And the idea is that loving kindness is not just acceptable, but ideal to show toward all beings, right? So in the Tibetan tradition, these are known as the unmeasurable, the four unmeasurables. And the idea is there's you can't measure the greatest quantity of these things that is ideal. There is no greatest quantity, right? You can always have more of them. They can always be more directed to an even greater number of beings, right? There's never a bad way to show loving kindness, is the idea. And I know some of you are skeptics like I am, and so you might be thinking about, well, do I really be showing loving kindness to people who are trying to attack me, right? So we can talk about later how that might be mitigated, right, or made more sensible. If you can show loving kindness, if you can befriend either the suffering of other people or your own, then you can more naturally develop compassion. And compassion, the word for compassion is karuna, is defined as a quivering of the heart in response to pain, right? The pain of other people, typically. This is something that I didn't experience until my 40s, actually. And you know it when you feel it, right? When you hear something horrible that happens to somebody and you feel this quivering in your chest, that's what the Buddha was describing. So clearly not everybody experiences compassion or has compassion in that, at least in that definition. And when you feel that quivering, you're also compelled to want to do something to relieve it, right? So that's the other piece of compassion. Sympathetic joy is the idea of taking delight or feeling joy at the well-being of other people. So when someone around you, a neighbor, a friend, a loved one, when they have success, when they have good fortune, rather than feeling resentment or jealousy, you actually take pleasure in their good fortune. And that's not always easy, right? We tend to, when we oftentimes hear about good things happening, in a kind of a surly spirit, we think, oh, well, they didn't really deserve it, or they cheated, or she was just using her looks, or something like that, right? And so letting go of those sorts of thoughts and simply taking pleasure in other people's good fortune. Letting their joy become your joy. Right? The last of these, which is I think the most difficult, the most abstract, and what would seem to be the most distant from the notion of love, is the idea of equanimity. So what is equanimity? It's oftentimes defined as calmness, to be calm, right, or even-tempered, to be fully composed, usually in response to some kind of external threat, right, or when things are not going well, in difficult circumstances, right. The person with equanimity is balanced, they're stable. And that actually allows one to both be resilient and also to feel a sense of freedom and to offer a sense of freedom to both yourself and other people. I want to read a couple of things here. The first is from a book by Oren Sofer called Your Heart Was Made for This. And he's describing a relationship he has with his father. He says, when I was growing up on a Saturday morning, my dad and I used to watch cartoons together in bed. I helped him with projects around the house whenever I could, building garden beds, cutting the grass. His smoking habit cast a shadow over these moments, and I begged him to stop. One year, he finally promised to quit for my birthday. Not understanding addiction, I was heartbroken when I discovered him smoking again. He eventually kicked the habit, but my heartbreak continued as he struggled to care for his health in other ways as well. I felt angry, helpless, and disappointed in the face of this. I oscillated between resigned indifference and idealistic attempts to help, before discovering a more balanced attitude. I never stopped caring for my father, and I did my best to accept the limits of my influence over him. The more I could accept his choices, the more I could love him for who he was, rather than for who I wanted him to be. Only when my father suddenly passed away did I see how much I had still been resisting my pain and helplessness, recoiling from his choices and withholding some of my love for him. We didn't fake equanimity or skip the hard road leading to it, but we can grow in wisdom, learn to let go of things we can't control, and thereby find balance. So a spirit of equanimity is one in which we allow people to be who they are, knowing that we cannot control them. Right? This is such a hard thing for parents, right? When our children make choices that we cannot influence, right? So there's equanimity sort of within your inner circle, but then think about the larger world that we live in, and especially now, we live in such a polarized world, right? Where it's almost impossible not to identify with one side or the other, right? One pole or the other. And when we do that, when we get unnaturally forced into this dualistic worldview, then we're set up for conflict and irritation and distrust. Right? We're divided against ourselves in a way. And so in the midst of that, I was reminded of, and thinking about that, I was reminded of an organization called Zen Peacemakers. And Zen Peacemakers was founded by a guy named Bernie Glassman, who passed away a few years ago. But he was a great social organizer, and one of his claims to fame was setting up a bakery in Westchester where he employed homeless people and people sort of on the edge, giving them livelihood and helping them be successful. And there are 3 tenets to Zen Peacemakers, 3 principles. The first is bearing witness, the second is not knowing, and the third is taking action. And so the idea of bearing witness is simply opening yourself to the pain and suffering in the world, as well as the joy, right? So whatever's happening around you, right, opening yourself to it and sitting with it. So they have retreats in Auschwitz, for example, where people go and they simply bear witness to the atrocities there, or the atrocities that happened. But I want to talk to you not about bearing witness, but about the idea of not knowing. And this is a famous, if you know Taoism, the Chinese religion and philosophy, Taoism, not knowing is an important virtue in Taoism. And not knowing is not ignorance. It's a matter of actually knowing that you don't know, right? Knowing that you don't know everything. So when you approach life with not knowing, it's another word for intellectual humility, right? You recognize that we don't know everything. And this is especially important given the kind of world that we live in, which is always in flux, always changing. There's always upheaval, there's always loss. So I'm going to read a couple of lines here about not knowing. And this is actually going to connect us right to some of the principles of Unitarian Universalism. So see if you can make that connection. Difficult circumstances, political upheaval, the sudden loss of a loved one, or the unexpected termination of your job, these can make life feel suddenly unstable. But actually, according to the Buddha, things are always unstable. It's just that we have a tendency to live life from a set of unquestioned beliefs that make our lives feel solid. How can you know what will happen next? You can't, because the universe from its tiniest particles to its largest forms is continually in flux. And so, returning to this idea of being present in the midst of that flux, in the 3 tenets practice, not knowing trains you to continually set aside fixed points of view. I describe not knowing as a flash of openness or a sudden shift to being present in the moment. This dropping away of the things you have relied upon for a sense of stability may lead you to examine what you believe is your center, to take shelter in the place before anything arises, a place of emptiness and profound silence, a place of the deepest rest where self-interest has not yet entered. This is not a void, but rather a darkness where things are not yet differentiated or seen. You yourself can go to this darkness and become like an empty vessel, empty points of view and preferences. An empty vessel refuses nothing and receives everything that is coming at it from all directions. By practicing in this way, you can create more space to accommodate your own reactivity and the points of view of other people. Lastly, expanding the circle. It should be said that the not knowing of viewpoints that arises when one practices not knowing does not demonstrate a lack of caring. Rather, not favoring any one thing over another allows you to center yourself within a boundless net of interconnection and to expand your circle of caring. In this way, the practice of not knowing can align you with the ever-changing interconnected reality called life, capital L. Practicing not knowing may seem impossible to do, and yet, when you realize that life itself excludes nothing, practicing not knowing over time will enable you to become more aware of what you choose to let in and open to what you had previously excluded. So, in particular, when we're thinking about the binary world we live in, to what extent do you share some views with the people who are on the other side? Right? To what extent is that dualism artificial? And yet we've constructed it because we've been directed to do so, right, by the people who are running campaigns and trying to get elected. So we're going to connect all of this to some mantras. And if you look at your handout, the 6 mantras of true love, notice that very first one, darling, I'm here for you, is really a way of expressing your presence to the people around you, right? And what's nice about these mantras is that you could use them internally. You can also just say them, right? I don't know if any of you remember the Monty Python movie. I think it's called Monty Python and the Meaning of Life. But there's that scene where the couple are in a restaurant toward the end, and the waiter brings them conversation cards because they don't really know what to say to each other anymore. So they pick a conversation. Do you remember some of the subjects that they talk about? Like they have a choice that you could talk about, I don't know, the Industrial Revolution or whatever it might be, right? And then you sort of read lines to each other, right? So, but in a way, you can think of these as like the perfect little set of conversation cards. Like, you know, you just not sure what to do. I'm here for you, right? You just fill it in. I'm here for you. Or number 2, I know you are there, and I'm so happy. So a way of expressing your gratitude for the presence of the other. Right? I know you are there, and I'm so happy for that reason. Now, to connect this to this comment about not knowing, this brings us to the very end of these mantras, the 6th mantra, you are partly right. One of the most profound definitions of diversity. Can I say that word, by the way? Is it safe to say diversity? One of the most profound definitions of diversity that I ever heard was the idea that everybody has a piece of the truth. So no matter how confused or benighted you think someone is, there's something about what they believe, right, that is correct. Right? Nobody is so benighted and confused that they're completely wrong. Right? And yet, in our tendency to figure out where we are in relation to others, we oftentimes think there's nothing right. There's nothing about so-and-so that is good. Right? That person is completely wrong, completely bad. Right? And so we allow our aversion to other people to create ignorance, right? It's actually the flip side of when we allow our attraction to others to create ignorance. So when you're when you first meet somebody and you're smitten by them, right? There's nothing wrong. They're perfect, right? They don't have any bad qualities. They don't have any imperfections, right? So that attraction creates ignorance, and the same with aversion. When we have intense aversion, it creates ignorance. We don't see that there's something right there. So you are partly right. And it's always acceptable to say this. So when we get time for the Q&A later, I'm going to respond by saying, well, you're partly right. And it's true. It's true. We were talking about compassion earlier. And so we have a couple of mantras of compassion. Number 3, I know you suffer. I'm here for you. Right? So when you recognize somebody is slightly off, there's something bothering them, I can see that you're suffering, letting them know I'm here. And what's even harder perhaps for many of us, number 4, when you acknowledge that you're suffering, darling, I'm suffering, please help. I found this to be tremendously valuable in my own marriage because, seriously, right? Because I just don't want to acknowledge that I'm not okay. I'm always okay, right? Of course I'm okay. But sometimes we're not okay, right? And letting the other person know you're not okay and then asking for help is a great way to begin to smooth over those conflicts that you have, right? Especially when they involve that person. And then to round out our mantras, number 5, this is a happy moment, another expression of gratitude. Right? So recognizing when things are going well and naming it. In fact, this is a happy moment, isn't it? This is a happy moment. So let's do some practice where we cultivate some of these values we're talking about. Meditation, mindfulness is oftentimes seen as a way of simply creating peace, right, or silence, but there's a whole range of contemplative practices where the goal is to actually generate feeling, generate sentiment. And we do this through a combination of visualizations and also phrases, right, that we're going to silently repeat to ourselves. So I'm going to ring the bell 3 times just to indicate that we're starting another practice session. We can go back to that comfortable position. So again, turning our attention inward, starting with a couple of mindful breaths. We're going to begin with that root, loving kindness. And we start this practice traditionally with ourselves. We started at home with ourselves. With the knowledge that if we don't love ourselves well, it's hard to love others well. And so beginning the practice just by calling to mind an image of yourself. It could be yourself now, in this moment, sitting in a fellowship building, or it could be an image of yourself in some other location, just an image of yourself where you can have regard. And just taking a moment to sense into your own goodness. For many of us, we don't do this too often. So just really sensing into your goodness. Something about yourself, things about yourself that other people appreciate or that you appreciate. Reflecting on your own desire to be happy, to live well. And keeping this image of yourself in your mind, or maybe holding yourself in your heart center, you can just silently repeat some phrases. I'll offer 4 phrases, beginning with just, may I be safe and secure in this world. May I be safe and secure in this world. You can let the phrases be the focal point for your attention or the anchor for your attention. May I be safe and secure in this world. Second phrase, may I be healthy. May I be healthy. Third phrase, may I be happy. May I know true happiness. The fourth phrase, may I live with ease. May I live without struggle in this world. In traditional practice, you would apply these phrases after offering them to yourself. You would offer them to a benefactor, which is somebody who has given you a great gift or bestowed some great kindness upon you. And then you'd move to a neutral person. This is good for our practice. So I'd like you to think about somebody who you neither like nor dislike. Maybe somebody that you see routinely in the grocery store or the post office. Maybe you don't even know their name. And just visualizing their face. And reflecting on the fact that just like you, they too wish to be happy and healthy. And to live with ease. Offering these phrases to them as well. May you be safe and secure in this world. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you live with ease. And in the traditional practice, the fourth person you choose is somebody that you have conflict with. Not an arch enemy, because that's going to be hard, but just take somebody who irritates you, gets under your skin. if this is too difficult, maybe you return to yourself as a focus of practice. But you can find somebody, locate somebody who is a difficult person for you. Just reflect on some of the difficulty. And of course, this is not to condone their behavior at all. Not condoning, but just acknowledging that when they act out toward you or irritate you in some way, it's usually a reflection of their own suffering. We tend not to look at that. Sometimes a place of deep suffering. So offering these phrases to them as well. May you be safe and secure. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you live with ease. When it comes to compassion practice, we can do a similar exercise where we visualize somebody who is suffering in this moment. So I invite you to, if you can, sense into a person you know, or maybe even some image you've seen on the news. Just hold that image or that scenario at your heart center. You can use phrases like, may you be free from suffering, may you be free from your suffering. Or sometimes more realistic, may you hold your suffering with ease. May you bear your suffering with ease. May you be free from suffering. Hold your suffering with ease. In the practice of appreciative joy, we turn to somebody we know who has had a success recently. They've had a stroke of good luck. They're doing really well. They're flourishing. Visualizing calling that person or persons into your heart center. You can offer a phrase, a simple phrase. May your good fortune continue. May your success continue. You find when you do this well that the joy that you can envision with that person actually begins to make you feel joyful. Joy is not an individual quality. Happiness is not an individual quality. For our final practice on equanimity, I now invite you to think about a situation in your life right now that is making you feel off balance, making you feel a little bit unstable, a little bit on edge. And in a way, all of these practices are practices of equanimity because we're sitting quietly in stillness in the midst of our mental experience, right, which itself oftentimes puts us off balance. But specifically with equanimity, as you visualize or sense into that instability, that imbalance, just using a phrase like, "This is how it is right now. This is how it is right now." Allowing yourself to breathe freely, letting your belly be soft. This is how it is. So for our final short practice, this is an exercise from Ram Dass. You might know the name Ram Dass. And it's called Just Like Me. And so to do this practice, I invite you to turn to the person next to you, to your left or right. Hopefully we can pair up. I see if you can find a buddy, and I'm going to find a buddy too. Looks like Michael needs a buddy. So in this practice, I'm going to invite you to simply look at the person in front of you. Actually, I'll practice with Bill as well. We can do it as a three-way, so to speak. That's okay. That's a natural consequence of contemplative practice. So I'm going to read some phrases and invite you to sort of look into each other's eyes. It doesn't have to be like a death stare, right? Just something that is comfortable. So feel free to look away as you need to, right? But just hold the person in your presence. Right? Be fully present with that person. And I'm just going to read some phrases. This person has a body and a mind, just like me. This person has feelings, emotions, thoughts, just like me. This person has been sad in life, just like me. This person has been disappointed by life, just like me. This person has been angry at times and has hurt other people, just like me. This person has regrets about some of the things he or she has done, just like me. This person has been confused at times, just like me. This person has experienced physical pain and suffering, just like me. This person wishes to be free from pain and suffering, just like me. This person wishes to be safe, to be loved, and to be healthy, just like me. I wish for this person to have the strength, resources, and support to get through the difficulties of life. I wish for this person to be happy, to be peaceful, to be healthy, and to be loved. Because this person is a fellow human being, just like me. Thank you, my friends, for your practice.